from the New York Times today. Iraq's new leaders face resistance trying to bring militias under state control. The Trump administration has demanded that Iraqi leaders distance themselves from Iran and rein in Iran-linked militias that are outside of government control. I wonder if you could speak a little bit on how Iran sees this, because there are groups like Kataib Hezbollah, the inside of Iraq, distinct from Lebanese Hezbollah, and then there's other so-called Iran-backed militias in Iraq that are part of the Iraqi state military, actually part of the group here. How do you see that, and is that something that Iraq is going to distance themselves from?
Well, the problem that Iraq has is that they're a hostage of the United States. The United States, ever since the sanctions imposed on Iraq under Saddam Hussein, after he invaded Kuwait, during that food for oil policy that was imposed by the UN back then, the United States continues to have full control over Iraqi oil exports. So all Iraqi oil goes to US banks, and the United States government chooses when to give Iraq its money. So Iraq is a hostage of the United States. It is always a hostage. And the Americans don't give Iraq its money. They decide how much to give and when to give. And so Iraq has lots of money in US banks, but they can't access it because the United States has not chosen to hand it over to them. This is the situation of Iraq that most people don't know. So it's not Iran that's the problem. Iran does not steal Iraqi assets. In fact, Iran provides Iraq with electricity and natural gas. And because the United States forces Iraq not to pay Iran, often the Iranians give that electricity and natural gas for like a year or two without being paid. And Ayatollah Khamenei, who was martyred, even during maximum pressure sanctions when the Iranian economy was doing poorly, he told the government not to halt those gas exports or those electricity exports, because Iraqis in the summer, Iraq goes up to 50 degrees Celsius in some places. Wow. And so he would say that, don't cut, even if they're not paying for it, give them that electricity, give them that natural gas, so that people can. So the Americans hold Iraqi money, don't hand it over. Iran gives Iraq gas and electricity, and they're not paid for it. And so who's the bad actor here? I think the Iranians would argue that it's the Americans.
Yeah, we'll see where that goes as well. One other interesting development that didn't get a lot of press here in the West at all, and I wonder if you can kind of give us some insight here. The Iranians have been seeking the hand of friendship of Islamic countries, including Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Turkey. You see this down here in the little right-hand corner. Qatari Prime Minister states that regional countries are currently negotiating a new security arrangement with Iran, moving away from reliance solely on the U.S. framework. Now, you just mentioned about the pressure that the U.S. brings on Iraq. Certainly, they would try to be countering that. But is there any possibility, especially in light of the fact that Iran just attacked a lot of those countries, that there's going to be a possibility of moving in the direction of reconciliation between Iran and the Arab countries?
Well, Iran's relationship with some Arab countries are very good. Iraq, Oman, Yemen, Tunisia, and these Algeria. So it's not. They're not. The relationship is not the same with all the different countries. But those countries that Iran attacked, as you know, is in retaliation to the attacks that came from their territory on Iran. So they helped the United States wage war against Iran, and of course they had to pay the price. But since the war finished, many of these countries have come to the recognition that they were foolish in allowing the Americans to use them that way. And so the Iranians are negotiating with all of them, some with more success, some with less success. You've noticed that when the Americans and the Iranians when the Americans would violate the ceasefire and attack Iran around the Strait of Hormuz in the past few weeks, the Iranians would bomb Kuwait, U.S. bases in Kuwait, in Bahrain, and even Jordan, but they didn't bomb the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. Why? Because the relationship with the negotiations that Iran was having with these countries, these three countries, had progress. So the Iranians want to build a new relationship with these countries, the countries that surround the Persian Gulf. There are 8 countries. Have a new security relationship with them, where these countries work together, and where the security of the Persian Gulf is controlled by these countries. And that would enhance the trust, that would enhance the wealth, that would enhance business among these countries. And without the United States, everyone would benefit. Then there's a larger arrangement that the Iranians are seeking, and that is for the entire region. And that is a greater convergence of countries from Egypt to Pakistan, from Turkey to Yemen and Saudi Arabia, where there would be greater cooperation among all of them, and a convergence of interests and a convergence of policy, security policy for the entire West Asia. And now that the United States has been weakened, the empire has been weakened, and the United States has been seen as being defeated on the battlefield and in siege warfare, the Iranians believe this is an opportunity to create a better environment for these countries to work more closely with one another. But it's going to be very difficult because the United States is still present. It has a lot of influence, and of course it can easily disrupt. And the Israeli regimes have also been attempting. The United States and the Israelis have both been trying to disrupt the relationships between Iran and these countries.
Yeah, and we'll see how that plays out there too, because there's going to be, I think that's probably some tension that's going to continue for a while. Interesting also, kind of speaking about, again, some of these countries in the region and the different pressures. Mike Pompeo went on Fox News, I think it was yesterday, and tried to make the case that it's really, of course, the Iranians that are at fault. Obviously, if he's speaking, that's going to be the case. But he makes an interesting claim here about what he argues is a lack of leverage on the Iranian side owing to their missile capability.
We've put an enormous amount of pain on their economy. We've taken down their ballistic missile capabilities. Hamas and Hezbollah are on their back foot as well. We need to continue this effort to make sure that all the hard work and the loss of American lives that has happened is worthy of the outcome.
Worthy of the outcome. So I don't recall the loss of Iranian missile capabilities. What is your understanding of the Iranian missile capabilities? Has it been destroyed?
Well, no. The Iranian missile capability and drone capability today is more powerful than it was when the war began. The Iranian economy has been damaged. There's no doubt about that. And for 2 reasons. One is because the U.S. and the Israelis struck Iranian civilian infrastructure. They bombed factories. They bombed apartment blocks, schools, hospitals. So obviously, a lot of damage was done. And then there was the siege. But we should, by the way, point out that while the United States struck Iran, Iran was striking back, and assets in the Persian Gulf and across the region were destroyed on the other side too. And while Iranian missile capabilities remain intact, because they're basically deep underground, the Americans would every day bomb these missile cities, underground cities, with B-52 bombers, and you fire Tomahawk missiles and other missiles to no avail. And but on the other hand, we know that many American missile systems and many different types of ammunition of the United States are now in short supply because of the war. So the situation for the United States is not better today than it was 3-4 months ago when compared to Iran. It's definitely worse. And U.S. allies in the region, if these Arab countries that assisted them in the war, their situation is far worse. Their economic situation is far worse. And the global economic situation is far worse. So it's a double-edged sword, this sort of argument. But what I can say is that right now, the Iranians are exporting oil like there's no tomorrow. And their ships have gone through the strait in large numbers over the past week or so, or whenever the siege was lifted. And since the United States is not, implemented its side of the bargain. The Strait of Hormuz is still not completely open for those countries that for the countries that have assisted the United States, and so it's Iran that's benefiting more now through the oil exports than the United States and its allies.
Fascinating. Let's take a look here in the last few minutes we have here at probably the biggest issue at all, because it's point number one of the memorandum of understanding, is there has to be a complete and total ceasefire on all fronts, to include Lebanon. As you've mentioned this a couple of times, but let me just show you a couple of things that have been said by the Israeli side here in the last couple of days. This was actually on June 21st. Israel Katz, Minister of Defense for Israel, said Israel has no intention of withdrawing from the Belfort, which is an integral part of the security zone in Lebanon, he says, and Israel will not depart from the security zone in Lebanon. And then here, these headlines from yesterday and today, it says that Israel says the IDF is staying in southern Lebanon, undermining Iran peace talks. And then I think, as you alluded to a second ago, even today, Israeli attacks killed 2 in southern Lebanon, despite ongoing talks. Is there any way to end this war, to have all this memorandum of understanding done, to have a negotiation, if number one doesn't ever get solved?
No, it won't happen. And so so let's go back to what I was saying earlier. After the 39 days of fighting, when there was supposed to be a ceasefire, and the Israelis were supposed to stop slaughtering people in Lebanon, Iran was supposed to allow the ships linked to those 5 countries to also use the Strait of Hormuz, because Iran never closed the strait. It was only closed to the shipping linked to those 5 countries because they were implicated in the assault on Iran. They were complicit. And but Netanyahu went and carpet bombed Lebanon, slaughtered hundreds of people in minutes in order to wreck it. And that's what caused the Strait of Hormuz to remain closed to those 5 countries for the most part during this period, and thus intensifying the global economic crisis. So this is basically because of Netanyahu, and then later Trump by imposing a siege on the Strait of Hormuz. Then now we have another agreement, the MOU, and the Israelis are saying we're not leaving. Well, that's a part of the MOU. So if the United States, because the United States is responsible for the actions of the Israeli regime, in accordance with the first article in the MOU, they've agreed to end the occupation, to end the violation of the sovereignty of Lebanon, to end the slaughter in Lebanon, and Iran, on the other hand, would fulfill its side of the bargain. So if the Americans are not going to do this, then the Iranians are not going to fulfill their side of the bargain. So Netanyahu has already dragged the world towards economic crisis, first by starting this war, then by violating the ceasefire 2 months ago, and now by violating the MOU, he's dragging the world towards a major crisis. Remember, Trump just a few days ago said that we have 4 weeks of supplies left, and energy supplies. The Israeli regime obviously does not care about the United States and its energy supplies. They don't care if there's a global economic collapse. So it's up to the United States to force the Israeli regime to do this, because it's obliged to do so. It is a key component of the MOU, and it is an obligation of the United States. So the United States cannot expect Iran to carry out its obligations when it is not carrying out its obligations. And of course, these obligations that Iran is carrying out is with regards to the oil and supplies produced by those 5 countries that assaulted Iran. It has nothing, like Iraq will export its oil, Iran will export its oil, Oman will have no problem. The Chinese, those who are not involved in the war, their ships will always go through, unless under certain extreme circumstances when there's no security. But those 5 countries, the Iranians are saying they are guilty, and we are only going to allow them to normalize their trade if the United States carries out its side of the bargain. So Iran is not going to allow Israel to continue the genocide in Lebanon. It is not going to allow the Israelis to continue to occupy the country and then carry out its side of the bargain. So we are moving closer and closer and closer towards economic catastrophe, thanks to the Israeli defense minister or genocide minister and Netanyahu and the government of Israel.